One. Hey, Dave Molenda here, Positive Polarity Podcast. Hope things are going awesome for you. I have to say right up front that we have an escaped prisoner that we're talking to today. So don't hold that against him. We'll definitely get into that in a minute. But the question that I want to start with today was like a question that I asked myself, and I had this higher expectation probably of myself than I should have. And so I want to ask you, the listener, the same question. And the question is, how credible are you? And I was like, I'm pretty darn credible. I got this, so you start immediately going through this Rolodex of all the things. Rolodex tells you how old I am. You go through all these things in your mind of I have this checked off and that checked off and things like that. And then I started to ask myself, why is that important? And that's kind of where I got stuck. So whenever I get stuck, I find somebody that asks me that question. And so I'm honored to be hanging out with Michael DeLon. How are you today, sir?
Man, Dave, I'm doing great. It's a beautiful day, and it's going to be an exciting time just to have a good conversation with you. Somebody who speaks the same language I do around marketing and business growth and being positive.
Yes, well, we'll see. Hopefully I do as good as you. I'm super excited. You're the president of Paperback Expert. So tell us, what is Paperback Expert and what's going on over there?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. So Paperback Expert's a company I founded a number of years ago, and we are a book publisher for small business owners. So we help business owners create a book without writing a word, so that they will actually get noticed by their audience. It will help them convert prospects into clients, and we teach them how to use their book to gain referrals to grow their revenue. And so we work with business owners across the board, because my contention, Dave, is business owners are experts at what they do.
Right.
Okay. But they don't have the credibility that you mentioned in the eyes of their audience. They're fighting the battle because it's very noisy out there. Yep. How do you separate yourself and differentiate yourself from everybody else? That's what we help business owners do.
Awesome. Well, and I guess it begs that question that I couldn't answer. So I might as well throw it out there right up front. I don't mind being vulnerable. I only learn when I'm vulnerable. So I'm looking at this going, credibility, why is it important to me? And I'm like, people are either going to like me or they're not. They're either going to believe me or not. I mean, I started to get kind of cynical about it. And then I'm like, I got to take this a different direction. So I'm like, I better ask Michael, because I'm like, why is it important? So in your research and in your experience, why is credibility so important today?
Yeah, it's super important because we've been lied to for so long. There have been so many bait and switches in really every industry, right? And it's hard for people to believe anything. We've heard for a long time, people, you got to know, like, and trust people. And I think that's true. I think credibility takes it to the next level, though. I think credibility is the level of confidence I have in you. And that confidence is really not from what you tell me directly, but from other sources. So are there third-party recommendations? Do you have a book? Do you have a podcast? Do you have the credible platforms and things? Because I look at credibility, Dave. I was at the Gulf Shore about 2 weeks ago. We took a family vacation, went down to the beach, and the waves, we're out playing in the waves, right? And when you're by the ocean, it's not the waves that kill people usually. It's the current underneath that takes you out, right? That's the strong current. I think credibility is more of the current in marketing and business, where know, like, and trust are the waves. It's what we see. And people need to, they've got to believe at their gut level that you are who you say you are, and that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. And so many times that comes from third-party things. So credibility is this underlying aspect of everything that we do, that you know when you have it, and your audience knows when you have it, and it just bonds you at a much deeper level.
Gotcha. So there's really the first nugget that I caught for anybody listening here today, is that third-party recommendations are really important. And I think that's so critical. I can look at a website, or I can look at Google and see what whatever they're called, what do they call those? I can't remember. What do you call those?
The recommendations, the stars, you mean?
Whatever. Yeah. Whenever,
rankings,
the
ratings.
Google ratings, yes. And so it's like you look at those and, if there's like 3 of them, it's like, maybe that was their mom and their dad and their grandma. But when there's a bunch of them, and they're positive, that third party recommendation really seems to then kick into the next level. And at least me as a consumer, I think, well, if they are, all having a good experience, chances are pretty high that I'm going to. So I'm assuming that this kind of is that one of the pieces is making sure that me as an entrepreneur and the entrepreneurs listening are really heavy on those third-party recommendations.
It is. And but it's also taking those third-party recommendations as client testimonials and having those on your website and having them in your email campaigns, putting them like in your book, right?
Okay, sure.
And it's not just, so many websites now are like 1990, right? You go there and it's all text, which is great, but you need some video interactions. But having short videos of your client saying, hey, Dave was great to work with. He's a spot on guy. He did what he said he was going to do. Really, really enjoyed it. Our business grew. We feel great about Dave.
Sure.
Having 2 or 3 of those is that third party. So it doesn't have to be like, the Yelps and things of the world. Those are great.
Yep.
But having real people talking real language about you, it's also media credentials. And it just all ties together. There's so many ways to do it, about building the integrity, the genuineness, the authenticity of who you are and who your company is. That's the credibility aspect.
Well, and I just was looking at somebody's website, and it might have even been yours, but I saw on there they had testimonials of people, and they actually had the picture of the person. And I thought, wow, that's really a great, because I have testimonials on my website, testimonials on my book and things like that, but I don't actually you're not connecting a name with a face. Anybody can say Joe B said, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Who's Joe B?
It's like, oh my gosh, like you said, we've been lied to, and we try. Maybe it's just me, but I try so hard to think that there's good in some of these people and they're really not doing it on purpose. But then I think, how cool would that be to have a face with a name and then the testimonial? I think any credibility you can add from that just makes it that much better, I'm assuming, correct?
Well, it really does. And pictures draw people in, right? And when you see somebody and you see their quote, you're like, oh, well, that's interesting. And you see different types of people, from my side. Yeah, there are attorneys, there are financial advisors, mortgage people, because we work in different industries, but it's that visual aspect of what it is. And if you look at my website, there's really not a ton of text on my website.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I saw that. Yep.
There are different pages and things. You've got to look at the purpose of your website, and credibility. Really, you're not going to build credibility with me only on my website. You're going to want to opt in, get on my list, and get my emails. And in my emails, you're going to get links to my podcast and my videos and my courses and my coach. And that's how over time, I think one of the formulas, Dave, that I use, like a math formula for credibility, it's consistency over time.
Okay.
And if you're consistent with your message, with how you deliver it, with the words you say, I'm sure, Dave, you've got a certain phrase or 2 or 3 or 4 phrases that you just use all of the time. And those are your phrases, right?
Sure.
That builds credibility, because when I read your books or hear your podcast or go to your website, there's that phrase again. When I talk to you on the phone, there's that phrase again. That's credible. That's the current versus the waves.
Gotcha. Well, and that's really the second thing here among many: consistency over time. I mean, let's face it, we all are in the drive-through world now. So if I post something on LinkedIn and it doesn't get my, desired number of whatever I'm looking for, within the first couple of days, I'm pretty disappointed in it. So, then I'm like, well, maybe I should try something else, And it's interesting because I just did, we're about 105 by now. It's probably 115 episodes into our podcast. And I had John Gordon, who I'm dying to get on my show, said, you got to have at least 100, podcast episodes before I will consider being on there. And I'm like, that's awesome. So I call him up when I got 100 and I'm like, hey, I got 100. And it was, I thought, well, 100, when he first said it, I'm like, that's a ton of work. But that's that consistency over time that people come to appreciate. And so I thank you for sharing that piece.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah. It's just really, really important. And let's talk about that real quick. Cause I think that's something that really just drives business owners batty is the whole LinkedIn posting, Facebook posting. And one of the challenges with that is there are so many people doing that. You post and within like 3 minutes, about 20 other people have posted, right? And so yours goes.
Yep.
I talk to business owners. We teach a business. Your number one asset in your business is your list, your database, your list of people that you can email. Okay. I'm a big fan of email marketing, Dave, when it's done the right way.
Sure.
Now, we send a daily email out. Why do we do that? Well, a lot of reasons, but one reason is that in today's culture, we are like in a soundbite culture, right? I don't have a lot of time. So the emails we send out, if I'm sending you a daily email, you might not read all of them, but I'm in your inbox every day. And once you learn that my emails are entertaining and fun and make you smile, you're more likely to start opening them. I can have top of mind awareness with you more easily through email than I can on Facebook or LinkedIn or anything else, sheerly because when you open your inbox, it doesn't have as much coming at it. Now, I'm not saying don't do the other things. Don't hear me say that.
Sure.
But consistency over time in email is a great way to build credibility with your audience because nobody else does it.
Sure. Wow, that's awesome. And, I think it's so funny when I get these LinkedIn posts from people and I just, connected with them and they're selling me something on the first spot and there's no consistency. There's nothing other than here's my stuff right away. And it just really ruins the experience for me, at least. I don't work well when somebody's like immediately trying to, hey, give me 15 minutes and I'll make you a millionaire or billionaire, whatever your aspiration is. And it's just crazy. But that's where I think the consistency comes in. Do you tend to see more and more entrepreneurs letting somebody else handle that because of all the hats we wear in a day as an entrepreneur? The last thing I want to do now is get creative, come up with a fun, exciting post. Are you seeing that, farmed out, so to speak, more and more?
I am. Once they get to a certain level, I work with a lot of small solopreneurs and small business owners where they only have 2 or 3 or 4 people in the firm, right? Yep. They're really not big enough to farm it out. They might have an assistant doing some of it. The challenge is 9 times out of 10, it's the business owner who really understands the heartbeat of that business.
Sure.
And what we try to teach them is, all right, let's think about communication because that's really what we're talking about. Whether it's in LinkedIn or Facebook or email or podcasting. I've had some clients who say, well, I don't want to do email because I'm not a good writer. I'm like, well, I get that. So let's do it this way. Why don't you pop on a video, do a 2-minute video about something and send that in an email?
Yeah.
And they're like, you can do that? I'm like, yeah, you can do it. There really are no rules.
Yeah, that's crazy. And I went through that exact same thing because my producer was like, can you create some content? I'm like, well, yeah, I create content all the time. So then it was like, okay, here's this topic, create content. So I'm looking at a blank sheet of paper for like, I don't know, half hour trying to figure this out. Right. So then she's like, well, why don't you, if writing is hard, I mean, I wrote a book, so writing should be that hard, but if writing's hard, maybe then go to video and just do like a 90-second video. And I'm like, well, that's super easy. And then I'm looking at a blank screen now. I mean, if it isn't there, it's not there. So I'm just curious from your perspective, Michael, if you have any tips for somebody that might be struggling to get started in, increasing their credibility.
Yeah. Well, obviously the number one thing in my world, right? We're a book publisher for small business owners, right?
Sure.
Credibility for me comes through being a published author. You're an author. I'm an author. In the mind of our audience and our culture, experts have books.
Okay.
So if you're really wanting to part the Red Sea and get a ticket to the front of the line, that's a fast way to do it.
Sure.
Okay? Having your own podcast. If you're not ready to do a book, get your own podcast up and running because a podcast is less about the number of downloads you're getting. It's more about the relationships you're going to build through guesting like this. That's how you and I got together, right?
Right. Yep.
And then I think building relationships through email. I mean, I'm a big email marketer. The other thing that I do a lot of, Dave, is I take these little things called thank yous, and I actually mail them to people. I put a stamp on it.
Wait a minute. There's a bunch of people don't know what mail or stamps are. So
yeah, it's crazy. I do a print newsletter on a monthly basis, right?
I got that. Yep, I get that from you.
So I show up in different ways. I send people these little gifts in the mail, and you open it up and it's an experience. It's got a little note in there, and then you fish around in the paper, and like this one's chocolate covered espresso beans because I went to espresso my thanks, right? They're little things. None of this is rocket science.
Yep.
But what I've done is I started with one. I built a system.
Yep.
We got that system implemented. Then we went to number 2, print newsletter. Okay, built a system. So the whole content thing, business owners are experts. Open up a Google Doc spreadsheet and have somebody ask you, what are the top 10 questions you get asked on a weekly or monthly basis from prospects, and have them just write down those things.
Sure.
Okay. And start talking about that. Usually those 10 will parlay into 20 or 25.
Wow.
If you did a blog a week, an email a week, you got 25 weeks of stuff.
Yep.
And just start recording all of your conversations and writing down what people are asking you, or maybe a comment that comes out of your mouth, right?
Sure.
A lot of times I'll tell people, Dave, never write a book. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Well, there's a blog post, an email, a video. I mean, I've got 5 or 6 pieces of content about why you should never write a book.
Sure.
So it's not as hard as people make it, but when you stare at that blank screen like you did, oh, dude, that's terrible. Bring somebody else in who can ask you some questions and just have a dialogue. Take them out for coffee and have them just ask you questions and record everything, or get it into a document and say, there you go. So, if I said, hey, Dave, can you tell me about, could you tell me a little bit, Dave, around the whole DISC personality profiles, and how many are there? Could you tell me anything about that?
Sure.
Okay. How long could you talk about that? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's really what business owners need to do is they're all experts at what they do,
right?
But don't go too deep, because your audience doesn't want that at this first level. When you're building credibility, you're trying to think about your audience. What are the challenges they're facing? So DISC profile, right? If you're struggling to get things done, if you got too much on your plate, it might be that you haven't figured out how to delegate, right? Why is that? Well, it may be based on the DISC profile that you're a high D who doesn't know how to delegate or something, and you need to bring in a high C person who's going to be able to take. They don't get it, but you do. But if you start going into the DISC profile in the depth,
it's over.
I've lost it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that for me, it started with your credibility quotient. So I'm like, well, it's got to start somewhere. So I'm like, all right, so I'm going to take this 5-minute assessment on your website. And I'm going to answer the questions. And I have to say, I actually went back on a couple of them and changed my answers, because I'm like, quit thinking more highly of yourself than you are, you knucklehead. Yeah. So I'm like, so I answer the questions. I end up getting a 59 out of 100. Don't know if that's, again, good or bad. But I think it really showed me some areas that I'm missing. And like one of them that you mentioned that I want to touch on because again, it doesn't apply to anybody listening. It applies purely to me, is the media credentials. You had mentioned that, none of the local stations, and this was kind of weird for me because I don't know how to walk into the local station and say, hey, do you know somebody in your community is an Amazon #1 best-selling author, has a podcast in the top 5% of the business podcasts worldwide? You start going into this and it's like, well, what do they care? So you kind of fight this, imposter syndrome piece. So for somebody that is the credibility quotient a good place to start for the people on the call and on the podcast today?
It's a great place. Yeah, we call it. It's at our website, paperbackexpert.com. You just go there. There's a big red line right at the top, credibility calculator. You take it as 20 questions under 5 minutes, and what it does is it gives you that score 0 to 100. And what it does is it helps you understand credibility from your audience's perspective. And then after that, there's a video series that teaches you how to increase your credibility. And I think it's important because what is credibility? How do you know what it is, right? Well, we did the research. We figured it out from the audience's perspective, because that's really where marketing happens, is in the mind, right?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like what you said. You walk into the newspaper or wherever in your local market, the radio station, you start quoting all those things. They're like, I don't care. You know what they're interested in? Their readership.
Yep.
How does your message connect to their readership? Now you're going to get their attention. And so we have a lot of clients who ask us about, how do you get on media? How do you do that? Well, we can obviously, get the media credentials from Amazon and ABC, NBC, Fox, those big ones. On a local basis, it really comes down to consistency over time, building a relationship with that media person, that news director, and saying, what is it that you are looking for? How do I serve your audience? Because that's all they care about.
So where would I find, I'm going to ask it just for my purposes, sure. Where do you find that news director? I mean, where do you connect? How do you start that? If the news director or somebody in the media is the right place to start. I mean, what's the first step that I would take if I wanted to get more exposure from the media?
Yeah, if you're looking in local markets or even regional, is go to the website of let's say a TV station or a radio station or a newspaper magazine. Go to their website, and the news director is usually there. Sometimes the program director is what it's called, and pick up the telephone. Okay, now you've got to understand that there are two different pitches. There's your sales pitch, right, which you're doing every day, talking to clients, and then there's your media pitch.
Okay.
They're not, these news people are not interested in your sales pitch at all. What are they interested in? Again, their audience. What is unique and different? What can you bring to them that their audience would have interest in? You've got to craft that first. But I think a lot of times it's getting their name, calling them and saying, hey, John, I'm Dave Molenda. I live here in Wisconsin. Are you the person who controls the morning show on KABC or whatever? Yep. Yes, I am. How can I help you? I'm a local person. I'm an Amazon bestselling author. I want to mail you a copy of my book. Would that be okay? Sure, whatever, right? But now you get an opportunity to mail them a copy of your book with a letter, call them, build a relationship first. Okay. If you go in there trying to hawk your wares and say, well, I want everybody to know about my book. And he's like, I don't care about your book. What's in it for him? He's interested in viewership, readership, things of that nature. Position your media pitch so it's a benefit to him, and realize this should not be a one-shot deal. You want to become a resource for him so that when something happens, he's like, I need a quote. I need to feature somebody. Oh, where's that guy's book? There is Dave. Yeah. That's but that comes from a relationship of what? Consistency over time. Are you mailing that person emails? Are you sending them your print newsletter? Are you sending them thank yous? It's a relationship like everybody else, but your pitch is different because you're not trying to sell him on you. You're trying to get to his audience and make him look really good or her look really good.
Wow. And that's got to be a lost art, I would think, what you just went through, Michael. The vast majority of people on the call, let's just be real, they're not going to do it. I mean, I'm even struggling thinking, holy cow, how in the world,
It really is tough. And that's why a lot of people, I mean, there are firms out there. I know people that I can refer people to who do this all day, every day.
Gotcha.
But it is obviously the bigger the market, the harder it is. If you're in a small town, I've got a client who's in small town, Wisconsin. I mean, really small town. And she has really dominated her local media because it's a small town. That helps. But they're involved in the community and things. Great. That doesn't always happen.
Sure. Well, how small? Because I'm in Waukesha, Wisconsin. There's not very many people here.
It's probably not. Yeah, it's probably a little bit bigger than you. Because it doesn't get much smaller than Waukesha.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Cool. Well, and that's where I guess it's really hard because we as entrepreneurs, we have limited resources, we have limited energy, and we have limited time. And so I totally get that. We have to pick and choose, is this the right business growth model for my company? Yeah. And so your, thought process of create your own podcast, create your own book, I always tell people that, if you can't commit yet to a podcast, I get it. Why not start being guests on other people's
Totally.
podcasts? You know, at least that's kind of a step in the right direction. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's brilliant because who gets interviewed? Experts get interviewed.
Yep.
And so if you can be interviewed on other people's podcasts, that's great. Now, guess what? Ask the host to give you a copy of that interview and start putting that interview on your website. And now send an email out to your list and say, hey, I was interviewed on here. And pretty soon you've been interviewed on 5 or 6 different podcasts. Well, that's awesome. Now that's on your website. So business owners, I mean, I think they make it too complex. I'm a big fan of KISS, right? Keep it super simple. Here's my whole philosophy, Dave. Very simple website. Obviously, your book, because you want to give somebody a reason to opt into your list. Offering somebody a free copy of your book is a great value.
Sure.
Get them on your list. Send a consistent email once a week. What are you going to write about? Well, what's in your book? You probably have 5 or 6 or 8 chapters, and you can write about those things all day long. Guest on other people's podcasts, and then eventually get your own podcast. And I'm pretty convinced, Dave, for a business owner, podcasting is not about how many downloads and things. It's about the relationship. So on your podcast, interview interesting people that your audience is after, kind of like the news director, right?
Yep.
And centers of influence, people that, so if you're a financial advisor, invite the local estate planning attorney to be on your podcast. Share with your audience what he does and the importance of that. Prop them up and start building the relationship because their clients need your services.
Yep.
That's how you make your podcast profitable, but start simple. Website, some kind of we call it a lead generation magnet. Now, it doesn't have to be a book. Could be a video series, could be a white paper.
Sure.
Get them on your list and start communicating with them consistently over time. That's going to start building your credibility because I assure you, none of your competitors are doing this.
Yeah. Well, and I think these are the hardest 3 words for me. Again, I'll be vulnerable. Grow your list. I mean, I run into people all the time. I'm talking to people and I just, for whatever reason, my blind spot is, you know, if they need something, they'll call me. And it's just like, I'm like, you know, I mean, I was at a event yesterday, was like a ribbon cutting for a local company, and there were people in it. I'm like, man, this is like great information. How do I like hit the record button for all this, you know?
Yeah.
And fortunately, some of the people that were there, you know, took pictures and put it on LinkedIn. So I was able to piggyback on that. But I just sometimes don't have that forethought, you know, to be prepared. Hey, I'm going to an event, do this, this, and this, you know. I mean, is that something that just come naturally for you? I feel like, Michael, because it's like, man, I struggle with that so much.
Yeah. It doesn't come natural. I've learned it over time. I've got a coach in a mastermind group in Dallas, and he's big on systems. And he's like, the easiest system is a checklist.
Okay. Yep.
So take a piece of paper. So here's the deal. You just went to this, right?
Yep.
You know, quote, where you failed. Get a piece of paper, do a Google Doc, and write out what you should have done as a step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the next time an event comes around, there's your checklist. Do those.
Yep.
Oh, now you're ahead of the game. Now you have just started building a system. It's called your event marketing system or whatever, right?
Sure.
And it might start with 5 steps, and then you just add a 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, whatever.
Yep.
And then eventually you hand it off to your virtual assistant or your teenager. And you say, can you run this for me? Can you do this? We're going to go to an event. Can you do this? Let's make sure we have books. Let's make sure we have this. So that's how you build systems. It does not come naturally to me. We've learned it.
Yeah.
And we've learned that I can build a system. And for business owners, so that's an outside system with a checklist, right?
Yep.
Inside your business, I use Loom, LOOM, which is a video recording system to record how to do certain things in my company. So any business owner, anybody listening can do this exact same thing. If you're going to do something once that's going to be done a second time, hop on Zoom or Loom and hit the record button and say, this is what I'm going to do. And you just go through the whole thing. It records your entire screen and your voice. And when you're done, you're done. And that's the system.
Yeah.
And now somebody else can watch that video and do it so that you can stay focused on what you need to be doing, which is meeting with prospects and clients.
That's brilliant. I tell you, it's funny. I was at a speaking engagement not too long ago, and I left my $5. My book's $15, which I should now. I'm thinking maybe just charge 20 and be done with it. But my book is $15, and I left all my $5 bills in the car. Okay. So Dave Molenda here again, telling the world that he's like, I was like, God, just take the book. Cause someone walks up with a 20. I don't have change. I'm like, just take the book, and I must have gave, I don't know how many of those.
Yeah.
And it's just like, cause you forgot the one little thing.
That's right.
Unfortunately there were 2 events. So I quick ran to the car for the second one and then sold out all my books. But the funny thing is like those little things, the should have done list. Yeah. I mean, man, thank you for that. I wrote that down. That definitely
because we learn. I mean, honestly, we learn best through our failures.
Yeah,
and they're not failures; it's the learning. One of my coaches says you either earn or you learn. It's like, okay, so you learn, great. Yeah. It'll never happen again because now I have a checklist, right?
I did not earn on that one. That's for sure.
That's right. But you did learn. You're implementing. It's going to change, and that's what it's about. That's what business is like. So many business owners, Dave, and I really want people to hear this. They look at others who seem to have it all together,
right,
and think they were born that way.
Yep.
But when we talk with them, you realize, man, they have been through the school of hard knocks. They've learned, they've built systems, they've hired people.
Yep.
Nobody gets there automatically. So don't get discouraged. Stay positive so you can grow on purpose.
Yeah.
But just iterate little by little. I mean, my company today, we've been doing this 10 years ago. I laugh. My son and I, who runs the business with me, I chuckle, Dave, because I look back, 6, 7, 8 years ago going, wow, look from where we have come.
Who's that?
Yeah. It's like, oh my goodness.
Well, and you just said
overnight.
Yeah, no, and you just said something really smart in that, it's so easy for me to give people get out of jail free cards. I mean, just super easy for me to do that. But I tell you, it's really hard to give myself one.
Yes.
And it's like, man, cut yourself a break. That's what I wrote down is cut yourself a break because why, if we've done, put it this way, that same speaking engagement, Michael, you get the results of, people rating you 1 to 5 and, 5 was the best and 1 was like, don't ever come back. And so every one of the ones that I got was a 5, except for I got 1 4. What do you think I focused on? Right?
Of course.
Exactly. I focus on the 1 4. I got all these 5s. People are saying this is awesome. Thanks for coming, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, man, what could I have done better? So part of that is, self-improvement, self-awareness. That's good. It's not good when it transcends me starting to beat myself up and not accept,
That's right. And about the 4, that may had nothing to do with you, by the way. It could be they had a bad day or they weren't, they didn't have enough coffee that morning. They weren't, who knows? And that's okay.
Yep. I know. Exactly. Well, so I want to, because we teased on this at the beginning as we start to come in for a landing today, you did say that you were in prison. So I want to kind of unpack that a little bit. And, you did escape. So that's good. I don't know if your parole officer knows you're doing this today or not, but fill us in on kind of what that looked like for you, if you could.
Yeah, no, that's great. I appreciate that. So everything in my business started when I escaped from prison. And prison for me was a 2-year time frame at a ministry that we loved, a family ministry that my wife and I were involved in for 10 years as missionaries. Mm-hmm. And I'd climbed the corporate ladder, and then they went through corporate reorganizations, and I got kicked off the leadership team. And so they shuffled me around the ministry for 2 years. And so I was in a job that I hated at a ministry that I loved.
Sure.
And that was prison for me. And so I finally got to the point where I got fed up and I said, Jill, my wife, I said, I got to go. I prayed. I said, God, I got to get out of here. And he's like, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
So I want to go help small business owners with marketing because they hate it. They struggle with it. And I love it. And so he said, go. So January 1st, 2013, Dave, I escaped prison, became a free man.
Well, and I think, thanks for sharing that, because there's probably somebody listening today that is in that similar situation where they may enjoy the company, they may enjoy the people, they may enjoy the vision, they may enjoy, the customers, but they just detest the job for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons that we do DISC a lot of times, is to understand what you're good at, because there's nothing worse. I know for me, my absolute terror and weakness and I hate is accounting. I just hate it, and I don't use the word hate much, but I do really hate accounting. And so, you know what, for me, if I was to interview and take a job in an accounting department somewhere, I would die. It would be so brutal. I could absolutely love the mission of the company, but I don't enjoy what I'm doing. So I appreciate that. How did you determine that? I mean, how did that self-awareness come about? Because somebody could have said, "Hey, Michael, that's work. Just suck it up and deal with it."
Yeah.
How did you get that, to that spot where you were able to see that?
Yeah. And what's funny, because there were a lot of my peers who were vocational missionaries, just like me. So, but it's ministry. This is God's work. We're changing families. Yep. And I'm like, yes, I know. But I would go home every night emotionally exhausted. The worst day of the week for me was Sunday night. Yeah. Knowing I had to go to work the next day.
Yep.
And when that happened week after week after week, and I would come in and sit down and realize that, today I get to open up a spreadsheet and call a bunch of radio stations to talk about this marriage thing. It was draining to me. Yeah. And I would go home and it was just like, And over time, it just realized this is not me. I love the vision. We still support people on staff at Family Life. We love the ministry.
Sure.
It just came time for us to depart and to realize that's okay. I wasn't sinning against God because I wasn't in mission. You know what, Dave? I do more good, honestly, through my business and ministry and giving than I did at Family Life.
Sure.
Because I reach so many more people and God's blessed us. And it's like, I think I'm vibrant for what I do, right?
No, come on, tone it up a little bit.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Give me some more caffeine. But it was for me, it was that emotional drain on a consistent basis that said, okay, this, I can't. I look down the road 20 years. I mean, back then, dude, I was a young guy. I'm 55 now. I was 45 then. Yeah. Looking down going, I got 20, 30 more years of work doing this.
Yeah, exactly.
Poke me in the eye. I mean, gosh. So it was that realization.
When we do talk a lot about that intersection of business growth and personal growth on the show, and there's a lot of times where there's people that have the desire to go out on their own, but they're scared to death because there's not a net underneath them of insurance and salary and benefits and 401k and all this. So I totally get that. But it's hard. I encourage people, if you're listening and you do have that passion to try it on your own or to do it on your own, there's plenty of ways other than just jumping in, with both feet. There's easy ways that you can kind of just test the waters. Michael was telling me in Little Rock that he might be warm enough to swim this weekend. So but I'm guessing he found the water temperature out by sticking his fingers in there or his foot. He sure didn't just jump in and go, oh, oops, I guess this was too cold. So
and making sure I stick my arm deep because the first 3 or 4 inches are warm.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, whoa, that's cold.
Yeah.
But on that, dude, when I escaped from prison and started my own company, I thought it was going to be easy street because I understand marketing, right?
Right.
But the challenge was, Dave, I would meet with you. Yeah. And we'd have a great conversation. And here's the question. You say, what have you done in the last few years? And I would say, well, I built marriages at Family Life.
Yeah.
And you would say, well, that's all well and good, Michael. Oh, look at the time. I've got another meeting. Let's keep talking. Yeah. Because I had no credibility as a marketing guy. You saw me as a ministry guy.
Yep.
All right. That changed when I finally published my book.
Right.
But the point I want to make is if you're going to transition into your own thing, A, make sure you got some money behind you. B, make sure your spouse is on board, because I would never have done this without my wife being on board. And C, you're going to have to be flexible. I feel many times, Dave, like in the last 10 years of my life, I've been a pinball in a machine, ding, 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 all over the point. I've had to reinvent my company multiple times because I'll come up with an idea that's awesome, but it doesn't resonate with the audience. So I've had to change and iterate. Right. You've got to be flexible to be successful.
And I think that's the biggest blind spot that I see for people is they think, man, I can't wait to own my own company. I'm going to set my own hours. I'm going to all this stuff that, I have to bite my tongue because I want to laugh out loud because it's like your customers set your hours. You don't set it. I mean, your bank has, all these new people and new entities that before didn't really exist in your life. They all of a sudden exist. And, the IRS wants to get paid for some crazy reason. I mean, all these things are just on you. And if you don't sell anything today, those charges, I've yet to have the bank or my credit card say, Dave, don't worry about it. Yeah. You're an author, man. You're good for it.
Yeah, no, seriously. I've got a guy in my community group. He keeps thinking about business ideas and things. And he made a comment about 3 weeks ago. He's like, I really like my new job because when I leave at 5, I come home, I don't have to think about my job anymore until the next day. Then I go back in and check in and I'll go. And I looked at him, I said, then you had better never start a company, dude.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because that is not, my business is on my mind all the time.
Absolutely.
Now, and I can check out and things. I took a vacation, but on my vacation, here's what I did. This is my tip for business owners. Because
here's our tip of the week. I was going to ask you tip of the week. Here it is.
This is it. I try to go off the grid as much as I can, but my brain's always running. Sure. So before vacation, as we got ready to get into the car, I opened up on my phone a Google document, brand new, and I called it Vacation Musings, Thoughts.
Okay.
And all through my vacation, when I had a thought of any nature that related to business, I just went to that Google Doc. I wrote it down and I hit save and I'm done.
Were you over 100?
Oh, dude, I can't remember how many I had. Yeah, no, I mean, it's just constant. We were on the beach for 5 days. It probably took 3.5 to really just go, oh.
Yeah, exactly.
But to find a place to just put all of my thoughts, and I knew where they were, so I didn't have to worry about it. It really was freeing to me. So a Google Doc of some nature to capture all your thoughts was really helpful for me to take a vacation and not worry about my business.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And if you're listening today, the goal here is to really have you look at your yourself, your company, look at your brand, whatever, and find out how credible you are. And I know it's a really hard question. And that's why I think, that's why coaches exist. That's why people like Michael exist, because we want to be able to, help you in that spot. So the first spot, like we had said, is the credibility quotient. Just go, to paperbackexpert.com and, start there. And that's going to give you, because I took it, like I said, and it asked me questions that I'm like, didn't want to fess up to, but then I'm like, hey, no one's looking, so I can be real.
That's right. Yeah.
I'm sure Michael's going to look at all the answers and go, oh my gosh, Dave, dude, you're in trouble. But, it's one of those things that's a great place to start.
And thank you on that. So that's a free resource. The other thing, Dave, we've got a free book writing program called Book Writing Boot Camp. On our website. It's the same exact process we use with our clients, but it's in an email format, because we've met a lot of people who they want to do it, but they can't afford me. Okay. I'm not the cheapest guy around, but there's a process, a way that we take you through from where you are today to how to get your book published through an email process at your own pace, absolutely free. So if you want to create your own book and you want to do the writing and everything, there is a program out there for you at our website. It's absolutely free, because I really believe business owners are experts at what they do, but they need the credibility of being an author. So we're trying to find different ways to make that possible for all types of business owners. So I wanted to make sure people understood there is a free book writing boot camp on our website. You can take it and it will help you get your book done.
That's great. Well, and if you're listening and this is resonating with you, this is where I try to encourage everybody all the time to take one thing away from today, whatever it was. And, because it's so easy for us to put this podcast down, listen to the next one, put on some music, go on to your next meeting, wherever you are in the world right now. I'm just going to encourage you to think of one thing that Michael said that maybe really resonated with you, it burned in your heart there. Just take that and do something with it. And probably the best thing that I would say is to at least have a discussion with Michael to be able to, help navigate some of these waters, because maybe you do the credibility quotient and you do your own book, and he'll help any way that he can, but there's other ways that I'm sure he can help. So if people want to get in contact with you, Michael, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah, paperbackexpert.com. You just go to my website, because seriously, everything there, that's the hub of the wheel for Michael, right?
Okay.
All my social media, you can schedule a call with me, you can watch videos, paperbackexpert.com is the place. And from there, you can navigate your journey wherever you want to go.
That's awesome. And just for the listener, what's your podcast right now? What podcast are you producing?
Yeah, we produce one called Experts Speak. We have guests like, Dave Molenda and a bunch of other people. So Experts Speak, we just interview a bunch of different experts around business growth, systems, marketing, accounting. You should listen to that one.
I'll pass. Let me know when it's accounting week, right, Michael. I'm sick that week, I guarantee.
I am with you, brother. My wife is my bookkeeper, and we have a CPA.
Man. Yeah.
And Jill comes, when we get ready to go to bed at like 9:30 or 10, she's like, okay, we need to have a meeting on money. I'm like, not right now, dear. Like,
hey, that's awkward. Quit sleeping with your accountant, will you?
That's
crazy.
right. That's right.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again so much. And again, if you're listening, I just want to encourage you to please don't just jump into the next activity that you're doing. There's something here for you. And even if you aren't interested in a podcast, if you're not interested in a book, you're not interested in a website, there are ways to increase your credibility, because I'm a consumer. And if I'm going to buy something from you, but I don't trust you, there's no credibility there, chances are really high that I'm not going to buy, regardless of how cheap it is.
That's right.
And, so if you want to learn more, go to paperbackexpert.com. And again, Michael, thank you so much for hanging out. I can't wait to learn more. And, hopefully maybe I'll see you at one of the Weekender Remembers if you ever come up in the Midwest. I know that it snows for 12 months out of the year up here, but you guys down there maybe could come up here once in a while.
I would love it, because, then you've got the Wisconsin Dells, and you've got all kinds of fun stuff that you just don't have down here in the South. So, and you have those cheese curd things, man.
Frozen cheese. Well, they're frozen or they're deep fried. So,
deep fried cheese curds.
Heart attack either way, buddy. Either way, you're
Dave, it's been a lot of fun. Thanks so much.
Thank you.